Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new series on this channel. Cue the dramatic music. It's called Read Aloud.
Read aloud.
Anticlimactic, I know, but I think it was kind of funny. Okay, so in this series, I'm going to be reading aloud the chapters of my book, which I think would be a great time. Yeah, I just think it'll be a great time. I really hope you like it. We're starting with chapter 1, and chapter 1 is very short compared to the rest of them, so this will probably be a short video, but I think it will be fun nonetheless. So, let's get on to it. The real question is, should I read it in a British accent? I don't think I will this time. However, if you feel it's lacking, write it in the comments down below and I will do it next time. I promise. I promise. I promise. Mr. Minister, do you think that bringing children from the island to the Renvalerian mainland will result in mass civil unrest or hysteria across the kingdoms? Mr. Minister, do you think that these children will cause excess amounts of violence or dropouts at Maladam Fissy School? Mr. Minister, a constant horde of reporters surrounded the Prime Minister as he attempts to reach the lift, pestering him with the same questions that they've been asking at least 10 times a day for the past month. Their unceasing, irritating, torturous interrogatives have filled his ears at all hours of the day. Even in his office, even in his home when he's alone with his family, but especially now, as he tried to enjoy a few seconds of reflection before he crossed the threshold of the life-sucking void that his office had become over his almost 3 years in office. Every question he was asked seemed to take a day off of his lifespan, slowly tormenting his mind, and with his press conference, as it drew closer by the hour, Tarios was almost certain he would die tomorrow. In only 4 hours, the Prime Minister would be free of the shackles of interrogation, even if only for the second or two of shock that would render the Cloud speechless immediately after he reveals the identities of his 3 chosen. Needless to say, the Minister was stressed. Those 4 hours seemed to go by quicker than Devonworth would have liked, but somehow he was the most efficient he had been in almost 2 months. He signed 2 laws into existence, oversaw a Security Council trial with the Sorcerer Satorum for a seemingly unimportant cause. He deemed it unimportant since he had forgotten all of the relevant details of the case the second he adjourned the courtroom. He yelled at a few interns working for the senior staffers and had an inattentive meeting with the heads of prominent Renvalerian families that were concerned about racial intermingling that would come about from taking children from the island to the mainland. When 3 o'clock finally rolled around, Tarios sat in his decrepit, stuffy office, writing a letter to the governor of Cantor in regards to the region's new legislation regarding the legality of selling vugs and pixies in their local markets. Tarios Devonworth's office was remarkably grand, packed to the brim with magical artifacts and looking glasses which would sometimes reflect the pictures of ministers of old that seemed to look over Tarios' shoulder, judging every decision that he made, every bill that would cross paths with his maniacal quill that seemed to threaten Tarios to write, to legalize, to condescend. No matter what Devonworth filled his office with, he was brimming with dread every time he opened its door. Maybe it was in part due to the late-night shifts he would take, chained to his desk as the sun slept, signing paperwork, writing letters, memorizing speeches, leaving for home after midnight only to return to his hell after the sun had risen. Maybe it was due to the endless, intolerable meetings he would have every day with his individual cabinet members. Maybe it was because he could only sit at his desk as the couch that he had dreamed of lounging on during his late nights were covered in files and books and letters, as was the armchair by the grand stone fireplace with steep mahogany paneling on the outside of the flue, engraved with the crest of his country, the United Kingdoms of Renvalir. He yearned for those nights in his armchair where he would sit, reading during his first few months in office. He was becoming a lame duck. Tarios had just finished his final sentence. It was about to sign his name at the bottom of the scroll when there was a gentle yet confident knock upon the door. "Come in." The dark paneled mahogany door opens at the Prime Minister's command, revealing a tall elvish man with fair pinkish skin, sharp pointed ears, a slim nose, sharp cheekbones, and long limbs. His eyes were a clear cornflower blue and came to a fine hawk-like point. His hair was long, straight, and as white as snow, and his robes were of light blue linen, edged in silver bindings and secured at the waist with a belt of the same color. The man's eyes seemed to glisten, not with sadness, but with hope. The hope of change, the hope of breaking down barriers, the hope of liberation. Heremedes Laufeyson had been opposed to the creation of Avesteus Isle when it was created 100 years ago and remained opposed to its continuation today. Heremedes graced into the room, his stern but friendly countenance radiating off of him like the foul odor of sulfur radiates from off a corpse. The Prime Minister smiled, a feeling of comfort filling his aura as he sees his friend's familiar face. He hastily rose from his seat, maneuvering around his desk to greet his companion. "Ah, Tarius! How are you on this fine morning, my friend?" Heremedes exclaims with a soft smile on his lips. That soft smile lifted the skin from around his eyes, making the elf look closer to his actual age of 6,000 years old, if only slightly. "I'm well, Heremedes. And you?" the minister exclaims, attempting to mimic his friend's geniality, a feat that he was never successful at, especially since he took office. Tarios places a hand on Heremedes' right arm. "I'm very well, my friend." The two men exchange content smiles once more. Heremedes then continues. "I hope you don't mind that I've come at this stressful hour, but I do have some questions regarding the upcoming debacle." Tarios' light-hearted smile from before shifts instantaneously to a raging grimace, as if the very thought of the media sucked all of the happiness out of his soul. "Let me tell you, Heremedes, those reporters are a pack of rabid chimeras. If they ask me one more time about it, these children will incite mass chaos. I will send them all to the bloody island myself." Heremedes calmly watched his friend erupt into flames, and as his spirit went from bright red and his, what were usually brown eyes, turned to black and looked as if they were lined in lava. If Tarios Devonworth's office was in hell before, it certainly was now, as the rage erupting from his demonic form turned the very walls, the desk, the paperwork into brimstone. Tarios was a half-dwarf, half-man, and stood at about 5'3". His hair was long and reddish-brown and well-kept, as was his beard, which was littered with braids and with beads. In the dwarvish religion, braids in one's beard or one's hair symbolize different things. Tarios, for example, had many in his beard. One for graduating from university, one for marriage, one for the birth of each child, and since he had 3, meant that he had 3 as well, and one for what he deemed to be his biggest success of all, becoming the Prime Minister. Whilst his skin was a reddish-brown, his hair was a deep ivory with a greenish undertone. His people were not generally of color, as they spent most of their time in the mountains underground, and therefore had no need to adapt their skin color. Tarios had a bulbous and crooked nose. The crooked part of the physiognomy of his nose came about when he was in the military and had broken it one too many times during bar fights and battles and such, not to mention the time when his 1-year-old son chucked a cup straight at his face. And he had a small scar along his left temple that he had also received during battle. When he was in Renvelier, he wore standard dress robes with a stark white undershirt, starched black linen pants, as well as a purple cloak with leather shoulder pads and belts over top of it all. After a few moments, Tarios began to settle down, the red disappearing from his skin to be replaced by his normal greenish ivory. "I can imagine your frustration. I've been in a similar situation myself," Heremedes said, as he placed a grounding hand upon his friend's shoulder, as if he was siphoning the negativity from off of him manually. He speaks again. "I do not need to know their identities as of yet, for I do have the patience to wait an additional 30 minutes, but I do need to know their ages, so we can schedule accordingly." "Oh, yes, of course. All 3 children are 13 years of age, or at least they will be as of this week. They all have an incredibly high susceptibility to magic, despite never having used it before. then we can only hope that they will blossom into brilliant young sorcerers under our protection. Yes, we shall hope, Hermides, we shall hope. An understanding silence breaks out between the two friends for a moment as they both come to realize that their futures, the future of their children, were up to chance. By bringing children from the island to Renvelier, they could not ensure that they would not follow in their parents' footsteps. But they could show them another way. They could show them the beauty of the light before the crudeness of the dark completely overtakes their souls. I will need to have a word with them when they arrive, or shortly after, to prepare them for their sorting ceremony. Monique wishes to introduce them to the faculty before school begins to level their playing field a bit. They're being put under enough stress as it is. Would that be all right, Mr. Minister? Yes, that shouldn't be an issue, but we're still trying to figure out where they'll be staying before the semester begins, as I've received some last-minute volunteers. I'll send you a letter before the week is out informing you of their address when we finally decide, but that shouldn't take too long. I'd say 1 or 2 days at the max. Very well then. Thank you, Terios, for your time, and good luck with your press conference. I know I am eager to hear your selections, but clearly I am not the only one. The whole world has come to watch. Remedy says as he takes Terios' hand in his, patting it gently with his free one. Oh no, thank you, Heremides. Terios replies, repeating his friend's actions. Good day, Terios, Heremides exclaims, releasing his friend's hand from his grasp, bowing, and proceeding to walk to the paneled door to which he had entered. Good day, Heremides. Terios walked back to his desk after his friend had closed the door behind him, picking up his mighty quill as he sits, dipping it once more in the midnight black ink that remains permanently glued to his desk. He gently and quickly signs his name at the bottom of his letter, rolling it into a tidy scroll after it dries, and then tying a thin piece of black twine around its center. He then stands once more, this time heading to the window and porch behind him. This time heading to the window and porch behind his desk, opening the bay doors and walking outside to reach the pigeon coop. He gently opens the door, gingerly grabbing a large pigeon with deep black eyes and light gray feathers that seem to melt as Terios touched him. He gently places the scroll within its talons. The cantor, Governor hearkens. The pigeon coos gently in response, then turns and shoots out off of Terios' finger, beginning his journey southwest. Terios stops then, watching the pigeon fly towards the horizon, observing how the sun asserts its brilliance with its rays of light that seem to glisten in midair, which made Terios feel as if God himself was reaching out to touch him. Come in. The door opens as it did before at the minister's command, but Heremides did not emerge. This time it was a woman. She was a tall, half-elf, half-dwarf with long, wavy red hair, who wore a golden tunic that reached just below her knees, with matching brown trousers and a red overrobe with no buttons and some kind of brocade. Oh, good afternoon, Constance, Terios exclaims, a comfortable smile and expression gracing his face as political aid walks into his inferno. Good afternoon, Mr. Minister. Are they ready for me? Yes, sir. The reporter's in a right frenzy. Can't possibly imagine why. Terios replies, sarcasm dripping from his voice like water runs out of a broken faucet. Constance snorts in an attempt to swallow a chuckle, suppressing it quickly in a matter of seconds. She clears her throat and begins to speak once more. What do you think is going to happen, sir? Complete and utter chaos, Constance. Complete and utter chaos. The briefing room had seemed so much bigger than the day before. When the communications team, senior staffers, and Terios Devonworth had rehearsed, but now, as it was overflowing with reporters from all over the globe, Terios felt immensely claustrophobic. More so than he did during his party's campaign for Satorium seats, more than any other appearance he made as Prime Minister. Before he enters the room, he takes a deep, fortifying breath, then nods to his guards to open the door. He hastily walks up the stairs to the podium, daydreaming about his 2 seconds of silence. Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon, Mr. Minister, the crowd replies as a mingled blend of 100 staggered voices. I would firstly like to thank all of you for being here this afternoon, as I am aware many of you have traveled extensive distances to witness this momentous, historic occasion. Terrio swallows the small lump in his throat. He had no memory of it being there before, so he attempted to repress it by means of swallowing until he could process its existence later. He may have been nervous, but Terrio didn't show it, as whilst he was grappling with his own anxiety internally, he held a gentle smile upon his lips. Now, Terrio claps in order to refocus his mind onto the main event. The main reason any of you are here, the chosen. The crowd claps then at the minister's words. The tension begins to rise exponentially. A selection of senior staffers, members of our High Guard and military, as well as myself, has worked tirelessly, night and day, to survey all of the children on the island, as we wanted to make our selections carefully. Let it be known that these are only our first 3 candidates. My administration and myself are completely morally opposed to the Island of the Lost and its magical barrier, but have deemed it wise to slowly incorporate the children from the island into our own society, in the hopes of one day bringing down this barrier once and for all. Joyous applause filled the room at the Prime Minister's last statement, as he revels in the patriotism his eyes scanned the crowd. As they wandered to the back of the room, they fell upon the kind, pinkish face of his friend Eurymedes's Laufeyson, as well as his hidden mistress in waiting, Monique Pritchett wore a thin circlet on her head, as well as a form-fitted kirtle and a deep red forest green mantle across her shoulders. She wasn't an elf, but she was raised by the elves in Nimwados before she moved to Renvalier to get a standardized education in magic. Monique, as well as Eurymedés, stood along the back wall, smiling and clapping, their eyes glistening with the same hope that Eurymedés had before, but somehow it was even brighter. The applause then began to die down. Now, to make our selections, we wanted to take the children most wronged by the island, by the system, the children that were given nothing but the dream of using magic. I am aware that many of your newspapers have begun to speculate who these people might be, so I think it is now high time to test your theories. Whispers. All that Terios could hear was the swish of the air, the breathy words, the suspense escalating with every breathy pitch. As the pitches filled the room, Terios found it difficult to breathe, and his heart rate began to increase dramatically. Firstly, Devonworth clears his throat. The son of Katerina Astria and Lear Godwine, Tutankhamun Awoda Astria. The whispers crescendoed, their previous piano turning into a stern mezzo piano, the melody of voices and questions struggling to sustain themselves. Secondly, the daughter of Juan Victorina and Celestinus Victorina, Ophelia Ching-Shi Victorina. Somehow, the whispers crescendoed even more, increasing to a ferocious forte, with every voice part harmonizing upon the words Big Three, all increasing their pitch up a half step, clashing with each other, suspending, and waiting for their resolution. And finally, Terios takes a deep breath, full of apprehension, as the moment he had been waiting for a whole day was about to arrive. He quickly finishes his sentence. And finally, the daughter of Onestis Olvidar and Vulcan Fidelis, Oswen Olympia Olvidar. As he speaks, he locks eyes with Eurymedés in the back of the room, who was smiling brightly in his direction. The choir did seem to fall out. An intense silence filling the room as the two friends exchanged smiles and knowing glances. This song had ended, but another one always Only about 2 seconds after he finished speaking, the choir returned at full force. The next movement of this never-ending major work beginning where the last one left off. The sharp fortissimo invaded his eardrums, all voice parts asking in harmony if these children were as wicked as their parents. The only thing that Darius could say in response was that he hoped they weren't. The only thing that Darius could say in response was that he hoped they wouldn't be. His voice, however, got buried by the sound. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, hit the subscribe button, and that bell icon, that's also very important. If you want a British accent, write it in the comments down below and I'll do chapter 2 in a British accent. And if you want to check out the story, I'll post my Wattpad account where you can find it. I hope you're all happy, healthy, and safe. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Hopefully. Yeah, hopefully.